But I wanted to ask you, I feel like a lot of high performance coaches, people, especially in the NFL or something, they talk a lot about measurement. And I feel like for me personally, people are over managing the results, the measurements, the practice, and all of the hard stuff. And they're not leaning as much into that spiritual connected, flow state of things. How do you balance, say, performance versus play in most of the work that you're doing or the people you're coaching?
I don't know about performance versus play, but in terms of the measurements that you're talking about, I think you're absolutely right. I think that the same thing is true in education as well, in that we tend to focus on measuring the outcomes of things rather than measuring things for informational purposes that allow us to know whether our strategies are working or if they're not working. In other words, the measurements become the outcomes of themselves. They become good or bad, as opposed to simply feedback. And they're just information about, I don't know, is my energy level now working? I don't know. Let's check in and see what the results are. And we can adjust based on that. And I think that idea of if I'm understanding you right, that difference between work and play and flow and not, that's a state that really does come from a place of high confidence. And depending on the skill, it can come from the automaticity of the skill. So sometimes, like you mentioned a few things,
Right.
stunts being one, gymnastics another one. These can be closed skills. So in sports psychology, we talk about open skills versus closed skills. Open skills are like soccer or
Okay.
basketball in the middle of the court. A closed skill would be a penalty shot in soccer or a free throw in basketball or a gymnastics routine or a dance routine. It's a movement that is rehearsed over and over and over again, and you do the same things each time. Whereas open skills, you need to be more flexible, more adaptive. And so I think there's a difference in those, in that the closed skills we can rehearse over and over again and get to a place where they do become automatic, and we don't want our brains engaged at all. And the open skills, we need to engage our brains, but in an open way, so that we're flexible and we can see all the things that happen around us. And all of that comes from a sense of trust. It comes from a sense of trust in ourselves, a trust in our abilities, not only physically, but mentally, to maintain that attention, to regain attention when the inevitable distractions happen, which they will. Emotionally, to be able to use our emotions, the frustration we might experience, the joy that we might experience. How do we leverage those emotions in a way to help us progress and to be more productive? All of that stuff comes into, I would say, falls into that category of play that you're talking about. That sense of confident trust, just completely in it and engrossed, and just feeling right.
Yeah, I really relate to what you said. And I love that you said open versus closed on that, because I've been kind of talking about it as order versus chaos. You can't live in complete chaos all the time. That's too stressful, right? If every day is completely brand new, you have to think about every little thing that you're going to do. And if you live in order all the time and every day is the exact same in your life, it's going to be boring. It's going to be miserable. It's going to be a really fragile system, because if anything, chaotic like a pandemic or something comes up, then that system breaks down. It doesn't fit the current reality anymore. And so I've been thinking a lot about how do we move from between those two. So I loved your analogy of in a soccer or a basketball game, when we're stopping and we're calling a specific play, versus when we're improvising and we're working off each other and we're moving with the flow of the game. That's really interesting to me. And I think there are different types of work, and all of them have their place depending on if you're applying the right skills at the right time. So if you're in sales and you're applying a closed skill, a script you learned in your sales training last week in an improv situation, that doesn't work very well, because the buyer doesn't have your side of the script. But if you're trying to build a car or something, it probably makes sense to, on a factory line or something, do that same repetitive behavior over and over again. And improvising every new car that comes off the line is probably not a very productive system.
Yeah, there's
So
a
I love that
great
analogy.
book. There's a great book out there called Range. It's by David Epstein. And he makes that case in that, you know, there's been a lot of discussion around deliberate practice for sports, that we practice over and over, and it's this deliberate attention to these skills that over and over after a long time, you know, gets us to a place of perfection, not perfection, but, you know, proficiency. And his take is, you know, that's the case for predictable environments. And he uses golf as an example. So a golf swing is that's a closed skill. That's a thing that you want to repeat over and over again. Or chess, which is very pattern recognition. The constraints are very strong. The left and right limits are pretty solid, as opposed to general life. You know, I mean, just life in general, we don't have that. So trying to approach life, like you just said, from the standpoint of let me just do these same things over and over again. Well, it might work in this situation, but it may not work in that situation. So thinking that we have it all figured out with whatever math equation worked yesterday, and that thing should work today too, with somebody else in a different place, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But yeah, that ability to be open and flexible and adaptive in different situations. There's a acronym I came across in the military called VUCA. It's VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and something else. and yeah, it just comes down to it's just a chaotic kind of a situation. That stuff is uncertain. We don't really know exactly what's going to happen. It can change any minute. It's very complex. It's not straightforward at all. And to understand that that's pretty much life, we need to have skills that allow us to be at our best in multiple situations, not just trying to figure out, okay, how am I good in this situation, or what might work with this person. It's generally, how can I get myself physically in a place where I can perform to my potential in a lot of different areas? What are some self-regulation skills that I can develop that allow me to keep my attention where it needs to be, keep my thoughts in a productive direction, an optimistic direction, keep my emotions in a place that are helpful for me, and that foster my well-being and promote my well-being rather than prevent it and hinder it. These are all things that I think are really important. Well, I lost you. Lost the.
That would be the mute button.
There you go.
Okay. But I found it. I Googled VUCA. That's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
Ambiguity. There you go.
But there's obviously a ton of that in life. And I love what you said there. Now,